Now we're going to take a look at creating a box plot, also known as a box and whisker plot. And what you need to create a box plot is the 5-number summary. Since we already looked at finding the 5-number summary, for this example I'm giving it to you so that we can focus on how to put that in the display. So what we're going to do is compare the working hours per week for a manager and the hourly workers at a business. So looking through, as a reminder, for our manager, the smallest data value or the shortest work week was 37 hours. The median was 45 hours. And the longest work week was 60 hours. The quartile 1, or the median of the lower half of this manager's working hours, was 41. And quartile 3 was 50. So the hourly workers, it's the same thing. The shortest work week for the hourly workers was 28, and the longest was 41. And then we have our quartile 1, median, and quartile 3. So to create a double box plot, we put these displays on the same number line, these 5-number summaries. So to do that, you need to create a number line. And I already have mine labeled for me. You don't have to start at 0. Our smallest data value was 28, and our largest was 60. So I made sure that those data values would fit on my number line and pretty much nothing else. If you use the whole number line that you have, then you're going to see the detail in the data a little bit better. So the first thing that you do is you just plot points above the number line for the data values. I'm going to do the hourly workers as my bottom box plot, and I'm going to do the manager on top. So the smallest, again, data value was the 28, so that would go between the 25 and 30. And then we had 33 hours, 36 hours, 38, and 41. So once you have those 5 points on your number line, you create a box around quartile 1 and quartile 3 with a line through the median vertically, and then whiskers, horizontal lines, out to the smallest and largest data values. And of course, when you're creating a double box plot, we've got a title overall, but each box plot also needs to be labeled. So this was our hourly workers. Same thing for our manager plot. Those points, I'm going to plot those above the box plot that I already have. So we're starting at 37 hours and 40 hours, 45, 50, and 60. Again, make a box around quartile 1 through quartile 3, vertical line through the median, horizontal lines out to your smallest and largest data values. So that's how you create the box plot, and of course we need to label it. In order to summarize the data or read these box plots, you need to understand, so remember how we created our 5-number summary. The first thing we did was cut the data set in half. Now, looking at the manager, this whisker is quite a bit shorter than this one, but they have the same number of data values. So what a short whisker means compared to a long whisker is that the data is condensed or spread out. So the so you're splitting it into quarters. You have 1/4 of the data set in each piece of the box plot. So when I talk about the box plot, I'm talking about 1/4 of the data. So I would say the upper quarter of the data, or the top 25% of the data, has a wider range or is more dispersed or spread out than the bottom 3/4 of the data, because the first whisker and the 2 boxes are about the same length. So that data is similar to one another, whereas the top 25% of the data has more variation or more change in the data set. Looking at the hourly workers, it's the reverse. This holds 25% of the data. A common mistake that students make when they're interpreting a box plot is thinking that a longer whisker means it has more data. It does not. It means the data is more spread out. There's more change in the data in that piece of the box plot. So in this case, I would say that the bottom 25% of the data is more spread out, and then the other 3/4 are about the same. They're more similar to one another when you're in the other 3/4 or the upper 3/4 of the data set. All right, so we talked about the spread per quartile. I would write that in sentence form, but I already talked about that and mentioned what that means. Next is the spread of the middle 50% of the data. So that's what's in the boxes. Now for both of our box plots, the middle 50% of the data, and just as a reminder what I'm talking about here, so that would be the box for each data set. Those boxes are about the same. Now the manager's boxes are a little bit wider than the hourly workers' boxes, so we could talk about that, comparing that the manager seems to work more hours than the hourly workers, and the manager's middle 50% of the data is slightly more spread out than the hourly workers' middle 50% of the data. So I'm going to try and jot these notes, kind of the key ideas, because I'm saying a lot, so I'm hoping you're catching this. So the key idea is manager. I'm going to say, okay, so the manager and hourly workers, middle 50% are similar. So the data set, the boxes aren't a lot wider. One of the boxes isn't a lot wider than the other. So the middle 50% of the data is similar or consistent. So they seem to work a consistent amount of hours per week. However, as we noticed, the manager's box is slightly bigger, so they have a slightly bigger variation than the hourly workers. So again, remember, when you're looking at the middle set of the data, that doesn't include any outliers. So it's a little bit better idea of the trend of the data overall. Because as we noticed for both the manager and the hourly workers, one of the whiskers was a bit longer than the rest. That could signify that there is an outlier in the data set if one of the whiskers is really long. And that's our next piece, any potential outliers. Now looking at these two plots, I really wouldn't say that there are any outliers because the whiskers aren't really long compared to the other ones. They're a little bit longer, but they're not significantly longer that it would make me think there's an actual outlier. So write that down. I won't take the time in the video to write that down. I would say no outlier. The whisker isn't significantly longer than either of the boxes or the other whisker.